I originally pitched this and envisioned this like a workshop. Like the 6 or 8 of you who would show up to be interested in this kind of thing, and I would chill in the back, and we would kind of have a little workshop while the main presenter did their thing out here so that we could do this a little more intimately, and you could probably really learn something. But then I found out that I was the speaker up here tonight, and there's way more of you than this is going to be feasible to do. So I had a little panic about it. And then I turned this more into, like he said, a talk within a talk. So kind of think of it like a long keynote where I try to not only tell you about good things for talks, but model good things for talks. Maybe that makes sense. So to get us started, if you aren't familiar with who I am, Dr. Tiffany Ford. And speakers always do this at the beginning, right? They introduce themselves. But it's not an introduction. That's not what it's for. It's to build trust and credibility. So when you get up here and you start with, hi, I'm so-and-so, and then what builds credibility? Do I tell you I'm a department chair at OTC for all of our computer science and IT and infrastructure and cybersecurity? Does that build credibility? Maybe with this audience. Do I tell you I'm on the board of SGF Devs? Maybe then you're like, oh, hell, I'm going to listen to her. Maybe you don't care that I'm the director of esports, or that I'm on the board of the National Association of Collegiate Esports, or that I've been a woman in tech for 25 years. Maybe some of you do. But when you come up here and you kind of give your introduction, that's what you're doing. You're building that credibility, but you're also informing the audience of who you are. So I narrowed this down to some key things to talk about, right? If I needed to impart about an hour's worth of wisdom on what it takes to stand up here and do this, this is what I came up with, right? These 7 topics. And it's not everything you need to know, but the whole idea of this workshop when I originally pitched it was maybe I could inspire some of you who really have something to say, who I think would be great presenters, to actually come up here and try this because you've never done it before. And so I'm going to kind of give you some tools and some guiding paths of how I do it, and maybe that will help you feel inspired, and then maybe we will have more of you up here doing this. He's pushing my buttons. So to kick us off, we're going to start with ideas. Every good talk starts with an idea. Whether that's you've been invited to speak at a conference, maybe in a keynote, or maybe you're on a panel and you're just talking about your experience, or you've been asked, hey, it would be really great if you'd tell us all about what you do, where you work. But you have an idea, and that's really where it starts. Everyone always thinks like, oh, I've got to come up with a topic for my title, I've got to build this presentation, but this is where it starts, right? And while I can stand up here and talk about my credibility and show you how to present, this is about you. Because everyone comes to talks to hear your ideas. And I know some of you right now are like, but I don't have anything to say. Or I don't think I have anything to say. I'm not a credible source. I haven't been doing this long enough. You know, I'm going to get judged. People are going to think I'm not smart. What if I screw it all up? But everyone feels that way, right? So we overcome it. And when you go to a talk, and you maybe have been to a few that you were like, that was awesome. Man, I loved that. I'm so energized. I went to a conference, I heard the speaker, and now I went back and my head's full of ideas and I'm just really charged up to go do something. That's great. That's what you want. But that's not where everyone lands. Some people hear a great talk and they're like, that was cool. I took lots of notes. Now I'm just going to do something with that information. Or, it didn't really land with me. Speaker was good, but the topic is okay. That's okay. We're not going to hit them all the time. So for you, if you're in that place of, I don't have anything to say, maybe you feel your experience isn't unique enough, or you're not creative, or like I said, maybe you think you're not intelligent. I would say everyone in this room meets the qualifications to come up here and give a talk. you have a unique experience because you're you. The background where you came from, how you got where you are, the technologies you work with, the people you work with, the interactions that you have, maybe a great experience you just want to share. Talks don't have to be hour-long exhibitions where you lay everything on the table. Maybe it's just 10 minutes. Right, you ever watch TED Talks? They're really short. Those speakers impart a lot of great information in a very short amount of time. And you could do the same. So it's kind of a paradox between you, always being you, and not always seeing how far you've come and what you have to offer, right? The people around you that you trust and that you love, they see that. They see the growth. But it's really hard for us to turn that inwards and say, yeah, I guess I really do know a lot about that. I could give a talk. That's hard. So getting over that, and maybe sometimes hearing it from someone we trust, is where that idea starts of I am good enough and I do have an idea of something I want to talk about. So the challenge here is, could you, and I'm talking to all of you, think about your life over the last, let's say, 3 or 4 years, right? Let's not talk about COVID, but maybe we did cool things over COVID, so that's unique. But what was the last thing you were maybe really excited by? Just a thing, hobby, anything. Or what made you angry? You're like, man, I really wish they would fix this. I just want to talk about it. Or maybe it was just surprising. Like, why does it work this way? Why don't people know how this works? Maybe there's 2 or 3 things that you've done that you're really proud of. And they could be small things. People always think they need to be huge accomplishments. But it could just be a small thing you've done that you're really proud of. If you built something in the last year that left your computer, it was a website that was public, it was an app that maybe you put on the store or put on your phone or showed it to somebody. Raise your hand. Did you build something in the last year that left your computer? See? You did something. Be proud of it. If you were in a conversation with someone, just having a talk with them about anything, and they were like, wow, that's really interesting. There you go. There's your idea. Because we can encourage each other to think about these things, but that's the idea, right? The inspiration is, can you take the next couple of weeks with your eyes open to the idea that you could do this? You do have something that others want to hear. You do have some part of your unique journey that's worth sharing. Open your eyes to the possibility, and things will start to pop out at you. So just take a moment and write them down when it happens. So as you explore your idea, maybe something just pops up to you as you're having a chat with a friend. Oh, hey, that would be, kind of an idea for a talk. I'll just write it down. Put it in your notes, right? We all put it in the phone. Why am I writing anything? But some questions you can ask yourself, right? Issues that matter most around your topic. Is there something in particular that you want to really dig into? Or is your topic related to another topic and that's a good thing to talk about? Maybe people don't always realize that connection. Can the topic be easily explained, or do you feel really completely out of your depth? Maybe you could back it off. How do you take something really complicated and distill it down to where someone who isn't familiar with the topic could understand it? Are there riddles or problems that center around this topic that we don't have good answers for? And you don't need the answer. People give talks all the time on just like, this is a thing, and we don't know why. So bring it out, highlight it. Maybe we can talk about it more, and maybe one day we do figure out why. And then controversy. People like controversy. We can talk about controversy, and we can bring up these kinds of issues in this kind of forum. Smart people and smart minds. So these public speaking engagements, they're really an opportunity for you to work on something unique. When I approach a technical talk, if I tell Levi, hey, yeah, I'll give a talk on that, I am not always the subject matter expert. Maybe it's something I just started working on and I'm like, this is really cool, I want to share it, but I've had 3 months on it. But that gives you the opportunity to really dig in as you prepare for your talk. And you have that really fresh perspective of someone coming in, which is most likely to be a lot of your audience members. So you can share what's important without getting too deep in the complex weeds. So and people get all hung up. They do. I'm going to give this talk, and I have to do all this preparation, and I'm not going to lie, it's work. It is work to put together a talk. But everyone gets so hung up on how do I do it? How do I get up here? I'm so nervous. All these people are staring at me, and how do I answer all these questions, and how do I not forget what I'm doing, and what if I drop the clicker, or what if I burp? Right? You could play this game all day. But what makes a good talk isn't the smooth talking. People make mistakes. We're all humans, right? It's not even stage presence or like smooth performance or even the confidence. Confidence helps, but you can fake confidence. You could be up here shaking in your boots. But if you have something worth saying, people will listen. So don't get too hung up on the how. Focus more on what. What are you saying? So really, what are you saying? If you have this idea for a talk and you're wanting to kind of explore, what do I want to say? And this is the process I took with this. When I first started out as a workshop, I had a pretty good idea of what I could cover and the time frame and how I would work with students, essentially, because I've been a teacher for a long time, so planning a workshop feels very natural. But all of a sudden, I needed to plan a talk around the idea of a workshop. And when you do that, you have to kind of do what I showed you on the first slide. You have to take the idea of, I'm going to teach you some confidence and some ideas about public speaking to help you be inspired to give a talk. Then what do I need to tell you? And what do I need to tell you that fits in the time I'm given? So that's how I came up with those 7 topics. But it's not an easy task sometimes. We write down lots of things. Sometimes we really know our topic, and we write down, we've got 40 things we want to cover. You build a slide deck, and there's 72 slides in there, you are in trouble. But we have a lot to say, and we're so excited. But it doesn't work. So every good talk has to have something meaningful, but you have to have a plan. I would be terrified to come up here and just extemporaneously talk about something. It wouldn't go well, right? My thoughts wouldn't be formulated. I'd be stumbling. I might forget a key point of something I wanted to talk about. We have to have a plan, but the plan is also to make sure that you are saying what you want to say. That arc of information between where we started and where we want to end. And there's this word that describes kind of this idea, and it's used mostly for things like plays and movies and the narrative story of a novel, and it's called a through line. So a through line of a story is that connective theme, where everything you talk about during your talk connects back to that main story. And this through line, it should be visible from the get-go, right? You knew what you were coming here to hear about. I told you what we were going to do, and I even showed you the topics that I was going to take you through. And when we're doing that, we're kind of enticing the audience. Maybe you read the title and the little description that I wrote, and you were like, heck yeah, I'm going to that. Maybe you were here to see Miranda. I don't blame you. And then you're like, oh, dang it, I got to learn about public speaking. But here we are. So a lot of people think of a talk like a journey. We start at the beginning. We move logically from one thing to the next. Some people talk about gifting an idea. I'm taking something that maybe you didn't know about, I'm wrapping it up very nicely for you, and I'm handing it over for you to assimilate and decide what to do with. So depending on how you look at how this works, it doesn't matter. We have to approach it the same way. You have to figure out that narrative storyline, or your topics and your talk and everything is all over the place. So step one of this process is really you. Again, I have to find out a lot about my audience. I can't teach to students who don't want to learn. I can't gift an idea to an audience whose minds are not open to that idea. So that's step one. Where are you with the people you're going to be speaking to? And then your through line requires that you identify all of those key points of your idea and then figure out how you can unpack them. I usually do bullets. I'm a pretty organized person, so I line my topics out, I make little under bullets, I highlight things I want to say. I kind of go through this narrative process. Maybe that's not your process, but that's what works for me to be able to build that structure. And then I start to move things around because I realize, well, maybe I should talk about this before that. I'm going to put that at the end. That feels good there. I start to move things around. And then once I have all of the topics lined out and I've got them in order and I've really thought about how I want to present this to the audience, then what do we think comes next? Editing. Editing's the scary part, because as we develop our through line and we develop our talk, we become attached to the things we want to say. And again, we're super passionate, we're super into it, and we really know what we're talking about, and we're getting excited about this idea of a talk. But now all of a sudden I got to throw out some of these bullets because they're not going to fit. So I kind of walk through sometimes these questions, but some of them don't always fit, but some of them, is it a topic I'm passionate about? Probably. That's why I'm already in this process of developing this talk. Does it inspire curiosity? Not all talks are going to, but you can ask yourself, will it make a difference to the audience to have this knowledge? Or could I omit it? Maybe that's a different talk. Maybe it just really doesn't fit in the flow. I like the information, but it doesn't fit, so I have to take it out. Can I take it and explain it with necessary examples in the time allotted? And that's really where editing comes in. Because when you're asked to give a talk, you have a pretty good idea of how long they want you up here. You don't want to be the person, they got to get the hook out and start off the stage and they play the wrap it up music like at the Oscars or whatever. And then the last one is what trips people up sometimes. Do I know enough about this topic to make it worth the audience's time? Sometimes as I go digging through topics to plan a talk, I come across something, I'm like, this is really cool. But I don't know that I can explain it well. And if I'm having to take other people's words and put them in my mouth in order to explain it, I don't want to do that up here. Because you're going to ask me a question I don't have an answer to. And so if I have a topic on my list that I feel really uncertain about, I will probably cut it, just to keep everyone from that pain. Then we end up in this place, right? Almost everyone ends up in this place. And it's so funny because people will say, I don't know enough to give a talk. And then they sit down and they actually start planning and they end up here with way too much to say. And so if this is you, and it probably would be if you start to plan out your talk, choosing that through line, walking through this process, topics, prerequisites, editing, really helps you filter out some of those things that you might otherwise say, but just are not going to fit in the time allotted. You really only want to cover as much ground as you can dive into in sufficient depth to be compelling. Because we've all been to that talk where that person tried to cover 15 topics in an hour, right? It's like a shotgun, fire hose, way too much information. There's like a million slides. They're going really fast. Nothing is landing. And that's the problem. You come out of that like, I got nothing out of that. You guys seems really smart, but whew, can't do anything with what I learned, right? And so we want our through line idea to be almost like a sentence. If you can actually get it down to 15 words that you can explain it to someone, that's great, because that means it's like a tight topic. You have a really good idea of what you want to say. Once you have that kind of under control and you're narrowing down that topic list, then things start to become more manageable. And then all you have to really manage at that point is some kind of scope creep. Don't start adding things into your presentation as you build it. Once you've got your topic list and you've kind of gone through this editing and pruning process, leave it alone. That's it, it's done. I say that, but I'm going to tell you to edit it more. But so how do I say less? Because I have so much to say. Well, the wrong way is to include all the things you think you need to say, but make them shorter. If you can't give it to me in sufficient depth, I don't want it. I want something to take away from the talk. I would rather you teach me basic CSS for an hour really slowly than like shotgun some crazy new technology that I don't even understand half the words because it's brand new and you're teaching it up here and I'm down here. And why? You've put a lot of work into your talk. Make it land. So 2 things we want to do. We want to show why it matters. Why is what you're teaching me or what you're showing me important? And our through line should really connect those things together. But we have a question we're trying to answer, we have a problem we're trying to solve, we have something we're trying to demo. Show why it matters. And then examples. We love stories as people. Humans love stories. Tell me a story. Show me an example. Demo it for me. Give me facts. Tell me why. Because at the end of the day, that's what I'm going to remember. You could be a terrible speaker, but you tell a good story and people like it. Doesn't matter that you told it horribly. You stood up here and told it like this the whole time because you think you're going to die. And I laugh because I was that person. Right? I'll tell you a story right now. And I tell this story to my students all the time because at the beginning of class, when you're introducing yourself to a class, it's a lot like introducing yourself at a talk. You have to build some kind of credibility with your students so that maybe they'll take you as their teacher and learn something and not just sit in the back and scroll TikTok. But when I was working at the IT department in OTC in 2008, I was very green and I was very young. And I had just finished my bachelor's degree at Missouri State. I was working in the IT department. And it was an okay job. I worked for Michael Scott. You know who I'm talking about? But it was an okay job. But something horrible happened over Christmas break. 2 instructors, a married husband and wife, who worked in the computer science department at OTC, quit over Christmas break. And their department chair called my boss and said, is there any way you could spare Tiffany to come teach a couple of classes for us in the spring semester? Because we are just not going to hire over Christmas break. It's not going to happen. We're not going to be able to find someone, and we're just desperate. We have all of these classes. And I was like, absolutely not. Are you crazy? I've never taught anybody anything. I can't stand in front of that class and teach anybody anything. I was just a nerd. I didn't even think I knew anything. You know, when you're fresh out of your bachelor's degree and you get that job and you're like, oh my God, I'm dumb. And so I said no. And they called back. because they were very desperate. Not because they needed me, they were just very desperate for someone who would please come teach some programming classes. And after some fun negotiation, I went over there and I realized I could do it. But part of the realization of I can do this wasn't like, oh, I got up in front of the class and suddenly I just realized that I could do this. Like, I've got these students and they're great. No, it was about relationships. If you can build relationships with someone, with an audience, with a class, you have just a little bit of trust and respect, right? Both ways. I'm not saying students have to respect me and because I'm the teacher, but it goes both ways. Then they would let me stand up here and teach them things. And it was okay. And I didn't die. Some days I sat in my class or in my office and really dreaded going to class and kind of was like doing that hyperventilate in a bag thing. And so when I hire new instructors now and I see that terror in their eyes, I totally get it. And it never goes away. And I know that's really disheartening to hear. But it doesn't matter how many times I've gotten up on I say a stage, but in front of a crowd. It doesn't matter how big of a crowd. That weird little fear never goes away. You just get better at telling it that you can do this, that you're okay, right? So, when you're thinking about your talk, how can you make it connect with examples and stories? Now, for a tech talk, that's easy, right? That's low-hanging fruit. You're like, I'm going to show you some cool code, and you're going to like it. And that's great. I mean, I love watching code presentations and demos and things, but again, it has to land, so make sure you're thinking about how it fits your topic, your through line, your time management. And then flash back so that you can cover that single connected thread. Less can be more. Absolutely can be more. Going back to TED Talks, small, several minutes, huge impact. So we've talked about topics and through lines and all those things, but then I got to stand up here and present it. Right? I've got all these things on paper, and now I got to, okay, so what kind of speaker are you? And really, you might not know, and that's okay. You got to do this a few times until you really figure out where your planning process is. But you really got to think about how you want to prepare a talk. So do you want to write it out like it's a script? And really just everything you want to say, just put it on the page, like a big blog post or something. Or just structure. Do you just want like bullet points and an outline and some key things, and maybe you're somewhere in between. Maybe you're like bullet points, but then I have like a whole paragraph in here I want to just read or something. That's fine. Figure it out. There's no right or wrong way. I will caution you about a couple of things, though, as you think about which speaker you are and how best to do this. So, speakers who kind of speak in the moment. I told you I would be terrified to just come up here and talk without at least having a plan, and you can see I have a plan. I don't always stick to my plan. Sometimes I look at that bullet point and I'm like, no, you know what, never mind. Or maybe I skipped that one. That's okay. If you're speaking in the moment, you have to really know the topic, but you also deliver it better, right? You can really let the passion and the confidence and everything that you want to say kind of shine through because you're not standing here reading it from your notes. Memorizing a talk script is very challenging. And what I want to caution you about is if you do this, it will sometimes make you more nervous. Because you're up here and you've got your script, and I've memorized it, but here's my notes, and this is what I want to say, but I got off script. I got off my place. Hold on a second. Let me find where I was so that I can get back on to where I was, and now I have this weird pause thing while I try to figure out how to get back on my notes. You don't want to sound robotic. You don't want to sound scripted. You want to speak like authentically. right? With meaning. The other kind of fallacy that people fall into is if they write out their talk and then give it, you will actually sound really strange because we use words or phrases or, cadences in written speech that just don't translate to the way we actually speak our language. So if you're going to do this, read it, record yourself, listen to it back. You will hear the strange things that you are saying because you wrote it the way you would write it, but not the way you would speak it. Unscripted talks are okay if you're really confident, you really know your subject. But I would really caution you. I don't want you to end up in that place where you're trying to find what you were going to say, and I've lost it. Oh, well, maybe I'll come back to it. Right? You're like, does this person really know what they're talking about? So you can have your notes. You can have your paper notes. You can have note cards. You can have an iPad, whatever is comfortable. Put it on your phone. What you don't want to do is read your slides like they're notes, because then it's just too much up there. So find the mode you're comfortable with, whatever works for you. There's no right or wrong way. Commit to it, and then get comfortable with it. Practice it. I will stand in my office with my iPad in my hand so that I understand what this feels like instead of reading it from my screen. I will put this clicker or a microphone, if I know I'm going to have to hold one, in my hand so I know what that's going to feel like. And I will give my whole talk to the wall. I will time it so that I know what it feels like. You can ask my husband, he's in the audience. He got this talk at dinner yesterday. And that's not a bad thing to do. Sometimes we need a sounding board. Sometimes we need people to hear us so that we know what we sound like. But let me ask you a question. Because at this point, you're like, this is a lot of work. I was kind of inspired at the beginning, but you're losing me on how much you're telling me I have to prepare. And that is one of the things that we know, like having an organization like SGF Devs, trying to find speakers, we know this is a lot of work that we're asking people to do, a lot of preparation. And that's why a lot of speakers, once they kind of get a talk, right, they get it. It's all made and it's all good and they give good examples and it lands well. They give it over and over and over again. Various conferences and dev nights and opportunities because it's a lot of work. So why? Why do we do this? Why do we ask people to do this? Why don't I just take all my notes and email them to you? Why do we want people up here? It's such a human experience kind of thing, right? And I think what we learned, and maybe COVID really hit this home, because did any of you go to virtual conferences during COVID? Oh man, they were the worst, weren't they? Everyone was like, please get rid of this. And conference organizers love them because they're way cheaper. Right? You can charge people to go watch some webinar Zoom nonsense, and I don't have to fly to Florida or something. And schools loved them because they weren't paying to put me in a hotel for a week somewhere. But I never want to go back. So really, it's the human element, right? Talks give us a little something extra. That I say takes that information, what it is that we're trying to impart, kind of turns it into that inspiration. Because again, you leave that conference so fired up. You heard that keynote and you were like, hell yeah, I'm gonna go home and do that. I've been to so many conferences where I felt that excitement that it took me a little bit to figure out why I wasn't getting it from these virtual conferences. And sometimes I still have to watch a Zoom or something, get some information, but I never feel that energized, up, ready, curious feeling that I do when I go to in-person talks. And so when you look at it, when you really dig into the psychology of what this is about, this is what's happening, right? we're building a connection. And as you listen to this person, are incredible, and they're giving you this great talk and all of this information, and you're like, hell yeah, I trust you to tell me the good things that I want to know. And you're engaged, and you're curious. And if the talk is presented well, then you understand, and you're like, yeah, I'm following. I'm learning. This is great. But there's that empathy. If you're telling your stories, if you're connecting the dots, people care. Maybe you heard my story and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe she got up there and did that. Maybe you have a really embarrassing story. People love those. Telling a really embarrassing story. I don't even think I have one. Yeah, see? But conviction. People speak with conviction so much better in person. When they do it on a Zoom, it's actually kind of off-putting, right? And then at the end, you want that action. You want to do something about what you just learned and what you just heard, and you want to take this new information and, yes, I want it. How do I do it? So understanding how talks work, the psychology of it, why we're here, is actually really important for speakers, because somewhere deep down inside of all of us is some kind of algorithm for trust and for credibility and for how emotions are spread from person to person. And as a that is ultimately what you are trying to tap into. You are trying to crack the algorithm. Now, we don't always have the details. We don't always know. It goes back to knowing your audience. Again, you can't gift an idea to an audience that isn't ready to receive it. Minds have to already kind of be primed. But we can all agree, while we might not know the algorithm, we have clues. The clues of how all that psychology works breaks down into two things. And this is what really freaks people out when they first start getting into public speaking and trying to figure out how to give a good talk. Because it's what you do with your voice and what you do with your body. Right? You know what I'm talking about. Because we've all seen both good and bad examples of this. So when we are speaking with meaning. We're doing 6 things. And I've been doing it the whole time, right? Volume. Some of you were in here earlier when we were doing the mic check, and I said, I've been a teacher long enough, I can project to the back of the room, but if I have a mic, that's fine. It keeps me from having to yell quite so much. But I do, because I want emphasis on things, and that's where I put it, is in the volume. Sometimes people will change the pitch of their voice to add some kind of emphasis, or I do it sometimes when I'm making fun of people. For some reason, my voice always gets higher. I don't know. I read this really interesting survey kind of thing while I was researching my talk about we vote for politicians with lower voices because lower voices inspire trust. Fascinating. Not this talk. Pace. Pace is so important. If you're up here and you're comfortable and you're breathing, if you're not breathing well and you're like hyperventilating up here, you can tell because your voice is going to come out all whispery and raspy, and your pace is going to be all nervous and fast and like, I'm so tight, I can't talk well. And then you can change things like timbre and tone, but it's this last one that people don't really understand, prosody. But we hear it all the time. We do it all the time. That's the sing-songiness of our voice. Putting inflection in places and stress in places. And it's that thing that some people do where there's an upward inflection at the end of every statement, even though it's not a question. So, understanding these things, practicing these things, so that you're comfortable with yourself and your voice and how you work is so important. I told you that having a smooth talker in the presentation doesn't really matter. But it matters if it's holding you back. If it's making you too nervous to get up here, then it matters. Now I have an example. This is why I wanted to test that the audio worked. This is Julian Treasure. He does a really awesome TED Talk about how to speak so people want to listen. And he does these vocal exercises I wanted to share with you, because as you do some talks like these, especially longer ones, and new teachers, they never teach you this, that you're going to talk all day without caring for your voice and your throat, that you should warm up the whole apparatus. So I wanted to share this clip with you of how this works. If you are so inclined, you can do them with him. I'm going to show you the 6 vocal warm-up exercises that I do before every talk I ever do. Anytime you're going to talk to anybody important, do these. First, arms up. Deep breath in and sigh out. Like that. One more time. Very good. Now we're going to warm up our lips, and we're going to go bop, 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 bop. Very good. And now, just like when you were a kid. Now your lips should be coming alive. We're going to do the tongue next with exaggerated la, 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 la. Beautiful. You're getting really good at this. And then roll an R. Not hard one.
That's like champagne for the tongue. Finally, and if I can only do one, the pros call this the siren. It's really good. It starts with we and goes to or. The we is high, the or is low. So you go wee. Fantastic. Give yourselves a round of applause. I'm going to show you the 6 vocal warm-up exercises.
That listen to me. There we go. So yeah, you have to warm it up. You can't just go into a talk without being ready. You know, it's like watching a runner run without stretching. So don't feel tongue-tied. Don't feel anxious and nervous and tight unless you've at least tried to give yourself the opportunity to warm up. And yeah, so I started doing some exercises and motions and things like that in order to warm up my tongue and my mouth and my throat and the vocal cords and everything. And then yes, if you are speaking a lot, things like throat coat teas and herbal teas and things like that, lozenges, are very helpful, because I know as a new teacher, by 3 o'clock, I was shot and like everything came out like a weird rasp because I was just done. So finding this method, the prosody in your voice, is sometimes really hard for people. They are just natural, kind of monotone people. And so here are some tricks that you can use. Because we've got our script. We know what we want to say. So you find the 2 or 3 words in each sentence that carries meaning, and you underline them. And then you go through the paragraph, and you find kind of that word that really matters, like that really key thing, and you underline it twice. And then look for the sentence that's kind of light in tone. Maybe it's fun, or it's not a heavy point. And you put a little squiggly. And then if there's kind of find your question marks, highlight them, ask your questions, prepare to kind of stop for a moment sometimes. Sometimes I'll ask a question, and then I'll just stop. Let it sink in for a moment before you move on. Find your big aha moment and put a big black dot there so that you remember to stop. And then if there's like a funny anecdote or a little joke, you can put some little dots above it so you remember. And then as you read, these are your cues. Change your tone for each mark that you made. So when you get to the little black blob, because that's your big aha moment, make your dramatic pause. Lighten your voice at a key moment. It helps people follow you. It helps our brains process what's being said. It's the natural language rhythm that we respond to. Now, some people are good at this. They're just kind of born doing it. They understand it. And some people, it takes practice. So it is definitely a learnable skill. You just need some cues to help you figure out where to put them if that's not coming so naturally. Then the one about the body. I don't quite understand what people get so hung up about, because it's never been the physical aspect for me, but some people do get very nervous. And, your body, it's not just like a vehicle to drive your head up here. They see you, and that maybe is the scary part. Maybe we're body conscious. Maybe we're outfit conscious. You know, I will admit, I take time to figure out what I'm gonna wear. Like, I don't just throw something on. If I know I'm gonna be in front of people, my media manager at OTC knows he has to give me a 2-day notice to be on camera. It's a curly hair problem. He cannot just call me at 3 in the afternoon and be like, hey, KY3 is gonna come over. Come on, man. But things we don't wanna do. You don't wanna just stand here. The arms weird at your sides, your shoulders all tight, like the audience is gonna suddenly charge. You're not gonna charge, I promise. Ideally, if you're just standing, I'll come over to the podium. If you're just standing, try to just get equal weight on both feet, right? Just stand. There's no reason to feel anxious about standing. We've all stood. We know how to do it. Be relaxed. Let our upper body just be relaxed. I know sometimes people are like, I don't know what to do with my hands. Like, do what you do with your hands. Sometimes I hold the podium. If I don't have something in my hand, like I'll put my hand on the podium just to kind of, it's like a touchstone thing. Now don't be that person who's like gripping it, like your knuckles are white, like you might faint. I'm gonna worry for you the whole talk. Good posture does help. Things like this freak people out. Know where your obstacles are. Avoid them. I haven't been coming over here because I'm afraid of tripping on the wire. I have one in my classroom that used to run right here. It was like a landmine every time I would move around. Some people like to walk the stage. I am a walker and thinker. If that's not you, that's okay. There's no rule that says you have to walk around while you talk. I think what makes people want to do that sometimes is it makes it really easy to have a little bit of drama, right? So if you're talking and suddenly you just stop and say something really profound, everyone's like, oh, okay, if you were paying attention. Now, I made a joke earlier when I was sitting back there that if I see anybody scrolling TikTok during my talk, they were going to suddenly become my workshop participant. But so far, you know, everyone's being so good. Now, the one thing I want to caution you about is if you're going to walk the stage, don't do weird pacing. Like where you're just, like maybe I'm going to charge. Like weird pacing around. So I do have an example, 2 examples actually, a good one and a bad one. I think it's bad one first. Yes. So this is Jessie Frizzell on why open source firmware is important. This is a great talk, but I want to grab her off the podium.
It's going to be more of like my thoughts on it, as well as like how to get involved and how to use it if you want to use it, and like why this even exists, right? So we're going to look at this from like a few points of view: security, usability, and visibility. And I'll go over these in order and try to prove the point to you that open source firmware is important. So first point of view.
It's a great talk, but she can't hold still, and it's so distracting that like I don't even want to look at her because I can't absorb what she's saying while she's swaying like that. So yeah, if you're going to be at the podium, the equal stance, like just hold yourself still if that's what's comfortable.
It's going to be more
here's
of like
a good example,
my thoughts
if I can get
on it.
Next slide. Any of you know who Kelsey Hightower is? Yeah. Now he's a great speaker.
I got my laptop on the podium. It's VMware Fusion this time. I launched the cluster, and the first set of machines come up. I type the first command to connect to the cluster to show Kubernetes off. And I can literally hear the music stop. My demo breaks. I'm like a deer in headlights. There's 10 minutes left. I look over and I see Brian Grant and Clayton Coleman in the audience. See, I respect these two. They're the people who taught me what distributed systems look like. These are the folks that helped review my pull request when I was just an imposter in the Kubernetes community. There's only 8 minutes.
So see what he's doing, and he's doing all the right things. He's moving around comfortably. He's using his hands. He had kind of that dramatic moment where he timed that music stopping. Maybe someone cued it for him, but it was very dramatic. So a lot of good examples of some of the things that I've been talking about. And so to kind of wrap up this section, right, we've talked about our topics and how to connect them, but us as technical people, we're sometimes explaining some very complex things. And I want you to think about this as you do it, because we do sometimes have some talks. When I tell my students, because they sometimes get so intimidated about coming to Dev Night, and I'm like, do not worry. Sometimes I sit in the audience and hear these speakers, and it just goes, whew. I don't know what you're talking about. I'll come, and I'll listen. But we have to take our audience and actually build up to where we're going. So we want some kind of introduction, open our audience's mind, right? We want them to be intrigued. What's the new idea they're going to get, or what are they going to learn? And then build on that and start to climb so you can introduce your first topic or concept. And if it's really complex, or you feel like maybe you can explain it in metaphor, that's great. Metaphors are great. Helps us connect dots with things maybe we wouldn't otherwise. Examples and demonstrations are great. That helps us learn better sometimes than just hearing the information. And so as you connect them together to your final point, just remember, sometimes we assume the audience knows things, and then we've lost them because they don't. And then the other flip side of that is what we call the curse of knowledge. It's really difficult to remember when we didn't know something that we know really well. And when we're all fired up about it,
5 minutes later.
I will show it to you. A picture is great. Put it up there. If you need explanatory power, when your words and your images are going to work together and not compete, there needs to be some kind of compelling fit. Otherwise, leave it out. Or aesthetic appeal. This is kind of what I've gone for. You've seen core ideas that I just talk about based on my notes. I'm not throwing a million slides at you. You cannot get this slide deck and then get this presentation. They have to go together. And I think it's a really huge disservice that we've kind of created where it's like, oh, can I just get the deck? Well, it's not, this talk isn't the deck. It's not in there. And then you can use slides to tease the audience's curiosity. Maybe you show a picture of a cool place you've been as you get them fired up to talk about a trip or maybe an opportunity that you had. Then the last thing I want to talk about is Q&A, because everyone dreads the Q&A. The Q&A is at the end, and you're tired. You've been up here, and you've been presenting, and this topic, you're done with it, and this up here, you're done with it, and this audience staring at you, and you're hot, and you're thirsty. Stop asking me questions. But it's hard. But you have to prepare, because what people fear about the Q&A is standing up here and looking stupid, right? We're all like, oh man, they're gonna ask me a question, and I don't know the answer, and then I'm gonna feel embarrassed and not know what I'm looking like, what I look like all nervous, and then suddenly I don't know what to do with my hands, and it all just falls apart at the end. You can prepare for Q&A, and this is how I do it. So if you have knowledgeable friends and family around the topic, or colleagues, or someone you can reach out to as kind of a subject matter expert, tell them what your topic is, what you're giving your talk on, have them kind of present you with the tough issues. What are some tough questions they could think of that the audience might ask? Search around online using different keywords that relate to your topic so that you can discover like what have people posted about on like Reddit and Quora and places like that. Then you embed those into your presentation so hopefully you cover them and the audience doesn't have to ask. You go back through your talk. Remember I said sometimes we go back and edit later. We try to figure out how to weave the answers into the content. Now, if answers are not directly related, that's okay. We don't have to put them in. We should be ready to answer them in case someone brings it up. But we don't have to add extra content. So if it's going to be too much and it's going to start to scope creep us out of our timeline that we've built, then don't do it. If you're asking a question and you don't know the answer, don't feel pressured to answer it. Just because you're up here doesn't mean you're the be-all, end-all of knowledge on the subject. If you don't know, that's okay. That's why we prepare a slide with contact info at the end. And definitely, I mean, it's okay to be like, I don't know. Do you want to look at it with me? Do we have someone else in the audience who knows the answer to that question? It's perfectly okay to not know the answer. But that's what everyone dreads, is not being able to answer a question. If you are in kind of this like hybrid situation where sometimes we get questions from like Twitch or online, or you're maybe in a big hall where everyone can't hear, kind of get yourself into that habit of repeating and rephrasing questions just for the benefit of everyone, but this also helps your brain formulate an answer, because a lot of times you feel very put on the spot and are having a hard time processing what you just heard. So if you rephrase it and repeat it back to the question asker, that helps. It can also help to have a notepad. If you are very like, that went into my brain and write out because I'm nervous, stand at the podium and take notes of questions people ask so that you have them right there. This is great for the people that like to ask the 3-part question. Because by the time you've said them all, I've already forgotten the first one. Don't lose your cool with awkward questions or with awkward people. We all know that sometimes we get that person in the audience who just likes to hear themselves speak. They don't actually have a question. They're just, I don't know what that is. Don't lose your cool. It's okay. Having a moderator helps, but if you're having to moderate your own Q&A, be okay with shutting it down. Like, that's a great question, but I don't think I'm going to be able to answer it. I'm going to give you my email. We can talk about it later. I'll be after. We can talk about it after. Deflect. It's fine. If you make a mistake, it's okay. You can be like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden I realized I told you the wrong thing a minute ago when I said, it's okay, just fix it. Some people like to deflect with humor. If that works for you, use it. But it's always best to end your Q&As by kind of repeating the main themes or key content points of your presentation, so as you wrap things up, people remember what it was all about. So, I really hope that this has been worthwhile for you. Maybe I have inspired a few little gems of ideas and some people that are like, maybe I really could give a talk. And it would be okay. It would be okay. It would be more than okay. We would love it. So we talked about how to find our idea, how to develop the topics under that idea, how to narrow those topics into a through line, and think about our time limits and constraints and what we really want to say and how important all of those topics are, and how to impart to the audience all of the key information we need with examples or demos or just connecting those ideas together to get them from one place to another. We talked about how to use our voice and our body, how not to develop visuals, and how to survive Q&A. And so, at that point, I put it back on you. It's your turn. Thank you. Do we have questions? Yeah.
If I wanted to talk at Springfield Devs, how would I go about doing that? Who would I talk to, or how do I submit a talk?
You tell Levi, who's in charge of the events committee now?
We actually have another way to do that.
Okay, cool. There's another way to do that.
Yeah.
They know. You just tell people. You just go in the Discord and just at the board and just put everyone on blast. It's fine.
That does work, to be clear. But the other,
just jump up and down at dev night.
yes. Raise your hand. No, I'm kidding. So on our website, under the About dropdown, there is a volunteer to speak link. And this takes you off to our Sessionize page. Sessionize is a tool used by meetups and conferences to like organize. And so you can sit there, fill out a bio, and give us all the details about your talk, and it ends up in a queue that we get to review and like lets us communicate back and forth with you. So that is the #1 way to go submit a talk. And if this has been inspiring, I would highly recommend that you go submit one there, because I will be looking at it.
And I don't think it's a terrible idea to use the Discord to just like throw ideas. If you were like, hey, maybe would people be interested in hearing about this? Just like in the general chat, like people can talk about it. I think you'd probably have a lot of interest for most anything though. This is such a diverse group. We like all kinds of things. Definitely not my area of expertise. Although, I don't know, biology is probably easier than computers.
As much as I want to ask a three-part question, I won't.
Hold on, let me get my notepad. Oh no, he's got the microphone, so that's important.
So I'm curious, when you first started public speaking, how many opportunities to speak did it take you to kind of find your sweet spot, or be able to look in the mirror and say, I'm ready to speak anywhere, just point me in the direction? When did you get really comfortable?
I think teaching is the cheat code, because you're in front of students like all day, 4 or 5 days a week. And so you get really comfortable with the idea of just being the center person, the person on stage. From there, scaling up into bigger audiences for me doesn't really feel that intimidating. I know sometimes people look out and they're like, oh my gosh, there's so many people. But like, I've never really fixated on how many people. Honestly, larger gatherings I think are easier than like more intimate ones, because it feels very personal and they're all staring at you and there's only 4 of them. Like, that feels very awkward. But I would say it was almost the whole first year of teaching I was a wreck. I just feel bad for my students that whole first year, because it was just, not only are you kind of flying by the seat of your pants curriculum-wise, but then like I was just having a meltdown every class period. But I think at some point I realized like I was getting more from it than I was enduring, and then it just kind of fell into place. And so, like I said, it doesn't go away. That nervousness, I'm doing it right now. And so you just have to get better at kind of being like, it's okay, the bad thing isn't happening. Coping mechanisms, right? And you do get a little more comfortable in your skin after you do it a couple of times, and you realize that like, I'm okay, my heart rate is good, everything is fine. Yeah, so if you are just doing events and you don't have a teaching cheat code, which by the way, if anyone would like to teach for OTC, let me tell you about all of the job openings I have. I would say it's going to take a couple. 3, 4, maybe 5, to really get the experience. And there are things that we didn't talk about. Like, knowing how this is set up is a huge advantage. You can kind of mentally put yourself here and get comfortable with the idea of being up here. If you're like, oh, I'm on a stage and now that feels intimidating, or yeah, you knowing the venue helps. And if you're giving a talk somewhere, there's no reason why you can't ask those questions. Like, hey, is there a podium? Is there a stage? Will there be a mic? Like, tell me all the details of your venue. Can I look at it beforehand? Like, those are not out of line questions for speakers that are coming to give talks. See, I went on a tangent with your question. Yeah.
How do you account for time whenever you're planning out your talk? Do you have like a set hour in mind and just try to get it, or is it not till you practice it?
So it depends on how deadline pressed I am. In this case, we found out Miranda wasn't going to be here like, what, Sunday, Monday? And so I quickly kind of had the opportunity to flip things around pretty fast. If I'm developing a brand new talk from scratch, it could be hours. It depends on if it's like there's like a code demo and like things I actually need to build. That could take some time, as well as planning the talk around what I'm demoing. If I need to source images, like if I need to go back through camera rolls and find pictures from like an event or something to talk about, that all takes time. Yeah, so it really can be hours of preparation. So I recently gave a talk at 2 esports conferences this last month, one at the National Collegiate one and then one at the Missouri K-12 esports one, that was all centered around 3 AWS services that esports directors could use to enhance what they're doing with their streaming presence, because most esports have like a Twitch or a YouTube and they're streaming, and they need a place to store all their videos, and they need a better way to stream, and we're supporting on-campus and at-home students in different streaming environments and different capture environments. So it was taking a talk of a really high-level topic, because these are not even really good techie people. I'm always appalled at how untechie esports people are, and really delivering it down here. So they were like, oh, this cloud thing isn't scary. I'm not going to accidentally run up a $20,000 bill. I could do this. I'm inspired to do this. Show me how to do this. That took probably, I would say if I sat down and did it that'd be 2 whole days of just planning out what needed to be said, really digging into how it needed to scaffold, pulling out screenshots and things from AWS, planning an IVS demo, and then sweating until I got to the hotel on their Wi-Fi to make sure it was actually going to work, because sometimes you'll go places and tech demos don't work on other people's Wi-Fi. So you always have to have something in your back pocket. So yeah, when you're planning a talk like that, it can be a lot of work. Yeah?
Oh, I just want to add, a part of that comes with experience as well. So like a part of planning a talk comes with experience as well. The more you do it, the better you get at gauging how long something's going to take.
Yes.
And the easier it gets with dealing with the time constraints. So what I've usually found is that like if you, like let's say there is a time constraint of 30 minutes, like working the talk up to like a 25-minute to give yourself some leeway works in your benefit, because like what just happened, like you end up going off on tangents, or you want a little bit of Q&A and it's still within that time frame. So anyways.
Run the mic around.
How would the way you speak change between speaking at an event or as a keynote versus speaking in a technical presentation to a boss or a stakeholder?
So if I'm speaking to a group like this, I think I'm a lot more relaxed. It's a lot less of a professional presentation. It's more like I would talk to a colleague or even a friend who was knowledgeable on the subject. If I'm giving a technical talk here, it's like among friends. That's the way this group has always felt. If I'm doing it for work, again, it depends on your audience. You don't want to give a very highly technical talk to non-technical people, and a lot of times, your higher-ups will take that very disrespectfully. So you want to know your audience and kind of be able to dial in like where that presentation really needs to land. Speaking-wise, I would want to think about my language, really making sure I'm using the correct technical terms, that everything is well defined. I'm not filling it full of acronyms and buzzwords that my audience may not understand. Making sure that I am really well prepared and polished, especially if I'm presenting up to like presidents or boards or things like that, really making sure that it looks professional. I don't know that my tone changes so much. I think I would still emphasize things the same way and still explain things the same way, but I would maybe add a little tone of deference in there if I'm making, I don't want it to feel like I'm talking down to anyone if I'm explaining something, so I would really make sure that I'm being respectful and that sounds the way that I deliver it. So I would really be careful depending on who I was speaking to. I have given 2 presentations to OTC's board. That was nerve-wracking. One directly just to the chancellor, which was worse. I never want to be one-on-one with the chancellor again. That was so intimidating because he's just staring at me the whole time. Just like, and I'm like, damn. You really evaluate every life choice. But when I prepared for those, I not only really went through everything that I was presenting just to make sure that it was going to be clear to a board that is not a technical group. They didn't know what I was talking about, but they were wanting to implement esports, not knowing what that meant. And so I was kind of there to educate in a very respectful way, so it didn't feel like I was, being disrespectful with my knowledge, which some people can take, especially when it's a younger woman delivering it to an older man. So I have to be cognizant of that as well. So yeah, lots of things to think about. I've never really put it all into words like that, so I appreciate you asking the question, because it's all just running around in my head now.
Question for those still in the process of overcoming their stage fright. Would you recommend they start by just essentially giving a pre-recorded talk and then they just stand up for the Q&A section? Or just dive right in?
I think it's a Band-Aid. I think
Okay.
you just got to do it. Easing in, I'm not sure works. Shorter talks would be better. So just learning how to deliver a quick 10-minute lightning talk, that would be better than a full recorded presentation and then I just stand up here for questions. Q&A is honestly the worst part. You're volunteering for the worst part. Standing up here all aimless while you just pelt me with questions is the worst part.
So who came up with the idea of this presentation?
I did.
What's the story behind it?
So, it was really, we want speakers. We want fresh speakers. We hear from a lot of the same people, and I'm not saying that's bad. We have a lot of great tech talent and people who obviously want to give their time to do presentations, or this group wouldn't exist and we wouldn't be able to do this every month. But I would love fresh voices, and I know a lot of you have cool things to say. I'm just luring you up here. So that's where it came from. We were brainstorming randomly one board meeting, and I had actually volunteered for a month or two ago and then kept postponing it as things came up. So, yeah.
I'm expecting our 2024 schedule to just get full.
Yes. We don't want to burn out the people also who are giving all their time. If it's the same 5 or 6 people, it's tiring, and we're going to start to have gaps in the schedule where we don't have talks because people are tired or busy or have life things, and that's just what happens. So. I'm almost out of water. That's when Q&A is over.
Sorry, I'll hurry. Maybe. Oh no, I forgot what I was gonna say.
It's the power of the mic.
Oh, yeah, it is. Having the mic and my brain went blank. How do you deal with after here? What if someone comes up to you and they're like, "Oh, I know more about public speaking than you." How do you mentally deal with that? Because that's, you know what I mean?
That person is a jerk.
Yeah, well, of course they are, but I mean, it happens. That's happened to me, just talking. And they're like, "I know more than you." Okay.
So I think for everyone, they're going to have kind of that jerk self-defense mechanism. So whatever yours is, some people would be like, "Okay, great," right? I would honestly, I honestly killed detractors with kindness. So if someone came up and was saying something jerky or your talk kind of sucked, why do they let you do that? Here, I took it right out of Levi's mouth. I think I'm going to embrace someone if they tell me, "Hey, I know more about this." Great, cool. Can we talk about it? Because obviously I want to talk about it and I'm really into it. And you were telling me that you know more. So can I get your contact information so that we can talk about it? Or, it's just engage. Because while I don't understand the person who would come up and let those words come out of their mouth, I would lean more on the side of this is just a really awkward social person who really just means, "I know a lot about this too, can we talk?" And actually it just came out super weird. But I think that comes from dealing with students who just don't always have fully formed frontal cortexes. So everyone before the age of 25, I'm sorry, you're not there yet. I've just offended half the audience, that's where it goes. Then that's how you know the talk is over.
She knows more than all of you about it. She deals with them.
If you do know more than someone, I wouldn't recommend coming up after the talk and shoving it in their face. But if you want to have a conversation with someone after they give a talk, yes, do that. I think probably the most off-putting thing, especially if you're nervous about doing this, the first couple of times you do it, you at the end, you're like, you're in that cool down. You're like, oh my God, I did it, I did it, I did it. I'm like really hot and itchy and weird. And then suddenly like people are on you. They're like, oh my God, that was so great. Thank you so much. Can I talk to you? Can I ask you another question? Like, and suddenly it's like paparazzi. That people don't warn you about. But it will sometimes happen where someone, they just, and I'm not saying don't, I don't mind. But like the first couple of times, just be prepared. People will kind of swarm you after you come off the stage or whatever to congratulate you or whatever, or say they liked your talk. And it's nice, but if you're in that social anxiety brain, it's a little overwhelming.
I will also throw out there that in our community specifically, I would say, please be respectful to our speakers and don't do that. And if that ever did happen to someone, please bring that to the board, because like we're here to foster a community of being kind to each other and respectful of each other's views and all that kind of stuff. So,
yeah,
obviously.
We nailed it.
Okay.
All right.
Any other questions? All right, I got a couple closing slides
Okay,
real
cool.
quick. Give me just a second to switch some stuff on the stream around.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. Like, that deserves a second round of applause, please. Thank you. That was amazing. Yep. Okay, so a couple closing slides. Number one, if you're interested in volunteering as a part of Springfield Devs, we're always looking for volunteers to help run these events or do communications or help with our sponsorship committee or the website committee. Any and all volunteers are welcome. The Springfield Devs Discord is the best place to go do that. We have a volunteer sign-up channel, so throw a few things in there. Also, kind of a reminder, I don't think I have a slide for it, nope. But on our website, under the About Us dropdown, there's a Volunteer to Speak link. So if this presentation inspired you to give a talk, we are very much interested in hearing about it. Please go throw your ideas in there, and we'll have a back and forth and communicate with you and get it on the schedule. So, I also want to announce our next Dev Night. We didn't get a chance to update the picture here. If you were here for Miranda's presentation, we're sorry about the last minute change, but she was not able to present tonight, but she is going to be here next September. We just didn't get a chance to update this slide. So Miranda will be presenting alongside Jordan Gilmore here. Yes, doing a deep dive into functional programming. Super excited for that. So, and then a reminder, after party at 417 Tap House, if anyone is interested. The address is up there. We'll need a few minutes to pack up streaming equipment and drinks and food and all that sort of stuff, so it'll probably be 30-ish minutes. But anyways, if you're interested, meet us down there. So thank you everyone for coming, and I hope to see you next month.